Okay, hello, I am Kan Chao and I will be in charge of the reading and gap filling sections for Group 2's presentation today. So I know that reading is a much dreaded topic, but I am here to make it better for you guys by sharing some tips that I found helpful to do the questions in the reading test. Okay, so I found out that there are 6 common types of reading questions, with the most common one being the main idea questions. So my tips for the main idea questions would be to read the whole passage carefully and ask, what is the author doing here? What is he or she trying to convey? And lastly, to summarize the main idea in your own words. Okay, so with that, we will take passage 1 in our handout as a practice. So for question number 1, the answer is C, the causes of culture shock. So as you can see in the passage, this sentence right here, and the author also gave some specific information on the causes of culture shock. So that's why C is the answer. But why are the others wrong? For A, it sounds similar because the word culture shock might be featured in the choice, but the impact of culture shock wasn't mentioned in the passage. For B, it is irrelevant. And for D, it is beyond the scope, which means the choice is related to the information in the passage, but it cannot be fully supported since it contains information that lies outside the scope of the passage. And the next type of reading question is the supporting idea questions. So these questions usually comes in the form of according to the passage or according to the author, or they give you a statement and ask you to fill in the missing information. So my tips for answering these types of questions would be to go through the choices one by one and eliminate the ones that were not present in the passage. Second tip would be to look for keywords. Find and underline the keywords in the choices and skim the passage to find a match. And another tip I would like to share is the ticks, X's, and O's strategy. For the ticks, there are choices that contain the info present in the passage, and only one choice should have a tick. For X's, there are choices that does not contain the info present in the passage. And for the O's, there are choices that you are not sure yet. So you should recheck the passage to see whether it deserves a tick or an X. Okay, with that, question 2, the answer is A. So if you look in here, and you can see that even when abroad on holiday, and that's why A is the correct answer. For B, if we use the strategy that I've mentioned earlier, you can eliminate the choice C and D. And for B, you will put an O because it is partly correct. But if we recheck the passage once again, you can see that it can be felt to a certain extent even when abroad on holiday. So even people who goes on holiday in another country can also experience culture shock. So that's why it is an X. Okay. Question number 3 is also a supporting idea question. So the answer is B. So you can see in this sentence, the grayness is synonymous to the word cloudy and the dampness is synonymous to the word wet. So we can eliminate the two choices A and D first because it is in opposite meaning to the two words in the passage. And for C, at first sight, you might think it is the answer, but if you look at the word cold, it was not mentioned in the passage. So that's why we eliminate the choice C. Question 4 is also the same type of question. So the answer is A. So as you can see here, and if we use the technique that I've mentioned earlier, A is the correct answer, so it's a tick. And B is incorrect, obviously, so we put an X. And for D, too, so that's why it's an X. And for C, at first, you might think it's the answer, so you put an O because you're not sure. But if you recheck that, you can see in this sentence, people may also speak quickly and you might feel too embarrassed to ask them to repeat what they have said. So that's why it's the correct answer and it is changed into an X. So the next type of question is the meaning of words. And they usually come in the form of the word ... in line ... is closest in meaning to ... And my tips for answering these type of questions would be to understand the meaning of the word in context. And usually these questions don't ask for the literal or the most common meaning of the word, so you would have to identify the specific context that the word is being placed in. The second tip is try to come up with a synonym for the word and look over the choices to find the one that matches. And the last tip is to reread the sentence with each choice in place of the word to see if it fits. And with that, question 5, the answer is C. So the word wrap in context means without interest or color. So it is the closest in meaning to colorless, while plain is simple, ordinary. Old-fashioned means not modern, no longer fashionable. And for D, formal is suitable for official or important occasions. The next type of reading questions is the accept or not true questions. So they are somewhat similar to supporting ideas, but they have an opposite. Answering this type of question would be to pay attention to the accept or not. The second tip is to eliminate the choices mentioned in the passage. And the last tip is to use the ticks, the X's, and yellow strategy, but this time only one choice should have an X. So with that, this question D are correct. So you can see here and here. So if we use that strategy I've mentioned, A is correct because it is mentioned in the first sentence that we have highlighted. And B, C, it is also correct as in the first highlighted sentence. And for B, we put an O there because we're not sure yet. And if we see the sentence, if you are invited to visit someone's home, you should probably aim to arrive at about 10, but not later than 8:20. So that's why it is correct. And for D, when going to a student party, an invitation for 8 p.m. probably means any time from 9:30 p.m. onwards, which means you can arrive at any time beginning from 9:30, so you can be late to the party if you want. And the next type of questions are the pronoun reference questions. And these questions ask what word or phrase the pronoun is referring to. So my tips would be to identify the type of the pronoun. And the answer will usually be stated a sentence or two before the phrase or word in question. And lastly, look for clues in the context of the paragraph. Okay, with that, this question B. You are correct. So as you can see here, we can use it as a preparatory object. This happens when the object of a verb is an infinitive or a clause, and when this has an adjective or noun complement. So we have the structure subject plus verb plus it plus complement plus infinitive or clause. For example, we found it tiring to listen to him. So in this case, it is used as a preparatory object in place of the infinitive clause to wear heavy winter clothing, which has the adjective complement uncomfortable after the verb find. So the last type of reading questions is the inference or reference questions. So my tips for this type of questions would be to sum up the idea in your own words before considering the choices, and use process of elimination to get rid of conclusions that cannot be supported. So with those tips, this question, the answer is B. So as you can hear in this sentence, if you are invited to visit someone's home at 8 p.m., you should probably aim to arrive at about 8:10, but not later than 8:20, which means you should not arrive 20 minutes later than the planned time for your visit. So an invitation for a house tour at 8 p.m. probably means no later than 7:20 p.m. Okay, so those are all of the types of reading questions that I found. And going to question number 9 of the reading passage 1, the answer is C. So as you can see in the passage, the people's style of dress is mentioned in the dress category, so it is correct. And the unusual weather is mentioned in the climate category, so it is correct. And for language, it is also mentioned in the passage, so it is correct. And for punctuality, it was not mentioned, so we put an X. And for the last question of reading passage 1, the answer is D. So this question is a supporting ideas question type. And you can see in this passage right here, the regional accents you discover when you arrive in the UK make the language harder to understand than you thought. And people may also speak quickly and you may feel too embarrassed to ask them to repeat what they have said. So the regional accents and make the language harder to understand than you thought, and people speaking quickly is what makes language considered as an element that contributes to culture shock. So that is the end of my tips for the reading passage. For passage 2, I will show the answers for you guys. So for the explanation, we will send in later in the Zalo group. And because our time is short, so let's move on to the gap filling section. So for question passage number 1.
The answer for number 1 is D. Number 2 is A. Number 3 is A. Number 4 is B. And number 5 is B.
And the next passage.
1B, 2B, 3A, 4D, and 5C.
So for the next passage.
Number 1 is C. Number 2 is A. Number 3 is B. Number 4 is B. Number 5 is B also.
For the last passage, where are the answers for this passage? For 1, it is A. For 2, it is C. 3, D. 4, for 4, it is C. And for 5, it is A. So that is the end of my presentation as well as Group 2's presentation for today. And thank you for your time. So do you have any questions?